Ladies and gentlemen, the following segment of the podcast is presented exclusively by the Heritage Foundation. For 52 years, Heritage has fought tirelessly for America's founding principles and advancing conservative public policies. Much more than a think tank, Heritage is a conservative policy powerhouse, fighting for the everyday American to advance common sense policies and dismantle the D.C. bureaucracy. Our founding fathers gave us an extraordinary system of government, and the Heritage Foundation is dedicated to defending the heritage and carrying on their legacy for future generations. So get involved by completing their national survey on President Trump's agenda by visiting heritage.org/Levin. That's heritage.org/Levin. Paid for by the Great Heritage Foundation.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. I never know how my voice and the asthma and the rest of it are going to behave until I start the program. So far, so good. But it's early yet. It's a lot to get into, America. I'm very resentful right now. In fact, I'm pretty angry right now. The left, the media, former federal prosecutors and their ilk seem to be saying if we criticize federal judges, if we criticize them, there's something wrong with us. If we criticize them, we're the ones who are politicizing the judiciary. If we criticize them, we might even be encouraging violence against judges. That is a contemptible, blasphemous lie. Any more than criticism of any public officials would cause any of those things to occur. This government was founded for we the people. We the people. By and for we the people. We have a constitutional construct that is being attacked at every level and in every direction. It is important that those of us who believe in the Constitution and believe that it protects we the people speak out and defend it. If you're interested in taking somewhat of a deep dive here, then this is your right show. The Constitution of the United States creates one court, the Supreme Court. I disagree slightly with my friend Newt Gingrich. No, Congress cannot abolish the Supreme Court. It can change the number of justices, but the court is a constitutional construct. Every other court is a creation of Congress. It creates it, it can eliminate it. It funds it, it can defund it. I also don't agree that we should be impeaching these judges. You want to know why? Not one of them will be removed. Not one. We don't have a super-duper majority of senators that will vote to remove any one of these judges, as long as the Democrats hold 47 seats. So that's not going to happen. So let's not piss in the wind, wet ourselves in the face, and act like we're doing something. There are ways to address this, and I'll get to this later. These federal district courts are a creation of Congress and the president with his signature. They pass what are called judicial acts or judiciary acts, starting in 1801. There's literally nothing in the Constitution that confers judicial review on any court, including the Supreme Court. So judicial review is at best an implied power. Thomas Jefferson would even reject what I just said. The framers of the Constitution, the ratifiers of the Constitution, believed strongly and said so and wrote so that the action would be in Congress and in the executive branch, the elected branches. At no time and nowhere did anybody, Federalist, non-Federalist, whatever you want to call them, Whigs, at no time did anybody argue for judicial supremacy. At no time did anybody argue that the Supreme Court should have the final say, let alone litigation trial district courts created by Congress. Obviously, they hadn't been created yet, but they couldn't have imagined it. And the idea that you can't criticize these judges, the vast majority of whom were appointed because they reject the constitutional order, the vast majority of whom were appointed, the ones we're talking about, by Clinton, Obama, and Biden because they were vetted as radicals, as activists, because they believe in the Wilsonian view of the judiciary, that radical change, that revolutionary change, centralized government comes from unelected judges. The idea that somebody like me writes about it and speaks to it and criticizes it and says enough is enough, that somehow I'm political. That somehow that this could lead to violence is outrageous. It's disgusting. It's unconscionable. We have free speech in this country, not just for Hamas supporters, but for law-abiding, patriotic Americans. There's not a word that passes my lips that suggests anything but legitimate and civil criticism. And that goes for anybody that I talk to on radio or TV. Just because some former federal prosecutors and others have been captured by what's been created out of whole cloth, just because they lived it and they practiced it and they were paid for it, doesn't mean the rest of us have to watch our Constitution be shredded right in front of our eyes. We now have a federal judge who says he ordered the President of the United States to call back an airplane or more, maybe two, that were flying vicious rapists, some killers, back to Venezuela from where they came. To El Salvador. These Venezuelan gang members. And we have the media, including the Wall Street Journal, Politico, and all the rest saying people like me are politicizing the judiciary. Let me be clear. The judiciary is politicizing the judiciary. When judges act like politicians, they must be criticized because they are surrendering their crucial responsibility to the left, to the abusers of government. They can't claim the role of referee and then put on the uniform of one side or the other. You don't hear me. You don't hear me attacking the independence of the court system. You hear me demanding the independence of the court system, upholding the Constitution, eliminating activism. That's where I come from. The key to our Constitution, as the framers explained in the Federalist Papers more than once, the key to our Constitution, as the great Antonin Scalia said, is separation of powers. Jefferson made the point. And he wasn't alone. Madison made the point, the father of the Constitution. Jefferson, the father of the Declaration. Where else are we supposed to go? Play along? Only exercise free speech? When it's approved, when it's okay? No, we're not going to do that. The criticism of these judges is more than warranted. They're way out of line. They know they are. The plaintiffs, that is the petitioners bringing these cases, they know they are. They're specifically picking these heavy Democrat cities because they know it's more than likely they'll get one of these radical judges appointed by Biden or Obama or Clinton. That's why most of these cases are brought in Washington, D.C., in New York, Providence, Rhode Island, Boston, Massachusetts, Seattle, Washington, San Francisco, California. They're gaming the system. They're literally picking judges who they know will rule on their behalf. This isn't about some criminal case, a motions filing, a brief where you don't like the result, a sentencing where you disagree with a judge. This is about the Republic. It's bigger than one case. The myopia of some of these commentators is pathetic. They want to defend these judges, then defend them. But get into the case. Explain to us what the Constitution says. Explain to us what the law says. Show us how these judges are ruling by upholding the law and the Constitution. That they won't do. They speak in generalities. The constitutional crisis we face right now is coming out of the lower courts of the federal judiciary. And it's got to be stopped. It either has to be stopped by the Supreme Court or stopped by Congress. The problem with Congress is the filibuster rule in the Senate, and I support the filibuster rule, but the Democrats are not going to try and limit the authority of these unelected lawyers at the trial court level. They're not going to do it. That doesn't mean we don't push it. That doesn't mean we don't put it on as riders. It doesn't mean we figure out how to put it in some kind of reconciliation so we can get past the filibuster rule. The smart parliamentarians in the House and the Senate who know Robert's rules up and down, they need to put their heads together and help figure this out. The four original constitutionalists on the court, Alito, Thomas, Kavanaugh's been doing well, Gorsuch, they need to sit down and have a chat with the Chief Justice because things are out of control and they're going to continue to go out of control if federal district judges act like federal national potentates. I've got a lot more to say, and I want to focus in on what this judge did or tried to do when he tried to order the President of the United States to call back planes in international airspace, to return Venezuelan gang members, vicious, vile gang members, back to the United States. You see, Joe Biden can open the border and invite them in specific violation of federal immigration law. But if Donald Trump's trying to enforce federal immigration law and remove them, apparently he needs this judge's permission. That's bullcrap. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Listen, folks, if you're like me, you're passionate about protecting our American values. That's why I trust the Heritage Foundation. They're dedicated to promoting policies based on free enterprise, limited government, and traditional American values. The Heritage Foundation does more than just produce policy recommendations. They're mobilizing conservatives across the country. And right now, they need you to take action by completing their national survey on President Trump's agenda. Your responses to this survey will help guide Heritage leadership as they work closely with folks in Washington to promote your values, secure America's borders, and restore our freedoms. Here's what I want you to do. Visit heritage.org/Levin, heritage.org/Levin to complete your survey. It's very, very important. My friends at Heritage need you to act now to help them maximize the impact on President Trump's first 100 days. Heritage is committed to preserving our founding fathers' principles and ensuring that America remains a beacon of freedom and opportunity. So I know you won't sit on the sidelines. You'll get involved, please, today, and make your voice heard. Visit heritage.org/Levin. That's heritage.org/Levin. Please complete your survey today. That's heritage.org/Levin, paid for by the Great Heritage Foundation. So you have union bosses, you have immigration groups, you have private lawyers representing immigrants, you have attorneys general from blue states, all coordinating, all collaborating, all colluding, and bringing scores and scores of lawsuits, bringing them in the front of as many Clinton, Obama, Biden, never Trumper judges as possible. And so right now we have chaos, if not outright anarchy, where individual judges who are supposed to be ruling in specific federal districts are ruling nationwide, making nationwide decisions. The law right now is unstable. It's unpredictable. The courtrooms are more like political rooms than courtrooms. And you and I are supposed to keep our mouths shut. Now, that's not happening. No, I have something very special for you. We'll start at the top of the next hour. Many of you have heard of this case, Marbury versus Madison. You probably don't have any idea what it is. That case affects you and has affected our forefathers, and is crucially important to understand, especially if you're not a lawyer, especially if you're just a blue-collar person who's out there working every day and you don't follow this stuff. You don't much care for lawyers. You didn't go to law school and all this gobbledygook. I'm going to explain it in plain English because that's what I do. I'm going to explain it in plain English so you understand what's happened to your country. And then you will see that what these judges are doing are absolutely outrageous. They're destroying separation of powers. They're destroying the power of the executive branch under Article 2. The Supreme Court is Article 3. What the framers did, they created a silhouette of a judiciary, if you will, for Congress to figure out the rest. But no Congress has the power to delegate presidential/executive branch powers to judges. Congress doesn't have the power to create these judges and then delegate to them powers that belong to another branch of government. In fact, the President of the United States does not have the power to delegate to judges the power that belongs to the executive branch. No single president, no single Congress, no subsequent president, no subsequent Congress has the right through statute to change the manner by which the Constitution was created and established. Period. Period. More when I return. Folks, I need to talk to you about something crucial to the future of America. Our friends at the Heritage Foundation are on the front lines fighting for our conservative values. Heritage is dedicated to promoting policies that will help bolster our economy, protect our borders, and uphold the rule of law. They're working tirelessly to defend our Constitution and the principles that make America exceptional. To help accomplish this, they need you to complete their national survey on President Trump's agenda today. So you can participate in this survey by going to heritage.org/Levin. That's heritage.org/Levin. Your responses are crucial to this survey, and they'll provide Heritage leadership with crucial feedback as they work closely with the folks in Washington to promote your values, secure America's borders, and restore our freedoms. By completing this very important survey today, you're standing up for the values that have made this country great. And my friends at Heritage need you to act now to maximize their impact on President Trump's first 100 days. So please don't wait. Our future depends on you. Together, we can make a difference, and future generations inherit a nation that is free, prosperous, and strong. So please, right now, visit heritage.org/Levin, heritage.org/Levin, complete your survey, and join the fight for America's future. That's heritage.org/Levin, paid for by the Great Heritage Foundation.
Mark Levin, the research arm of conservative media. Call in now, 877-381-3811.
Okay, let me do it now, not next hour, because Mr. Producer is going to push this segment as far out as he's allowed. Under the rule of law. No, as far out as we can. Okay, this comes from my first book, Men in Black, which was a massive bestseller on the Supreme Court. There'd never been a massive bestseller on the Supreme Court before. But I want you to listen to this. As I said, while the Constitution created this silhouette of the national judiciary, they're very, very important. You're going to now know more than anybody else. It was up to Congress actually to form it with legislation that would constitute a functional system of federal courts. Remember, whatever Congress creates, the president either signs or doesn't as well. Congress did this with the Judiciary Acts of 1789 and 1801. Now, the biggest problem with the Judiciary Act of 1801 was timing. The bill was introduced before the presidential election of 1800, but was not passed by the Federalist-controlled Congress until after the election. And while the deadlock presidential election was being determined by the House of Representatives, President John Adams, he was the Federalist, signed the bill on February 13, 1801, just 3 weeks before the end of his term of office. So he signs the bill knowing he's lame duck, knowing that he lost, Jefferson won, the Democratic Republicans won the entire House and Senate, and so the Federalists are going out, and Adams signs it anyway. He also sent to the Federalist-controlled Senate, his party, nominees for the 16 new judgeships, and they were confirmed shortly before the end of the Adams administration. So the Federalists created these judgeships, filled these judgeships after they lost, but before they left. Now, these judges, sorry, I'm having to move the book around, came to be called Adams Midnight Judges, some of whom became the subject of the case Marbury versus Madison. On March 8, 1802, just days after Thomas Jefferson's followers, the Republicans, took control of both houses of Congress, Congress repealed the Judiciary Act of 1801. On April 28, 1802, Congress enacted the Judiciary Act of 1802, which, among other things, abolished those 16 new judgeships created by Adams and his Federalist Party that were now out of power. In its 1803 Marbury versus Madison decision, the Supreme Court determined that had the power to decide cases about the constitutionality of congressional or executive actions, and when it deemed they violated the Constitution, it could overturn them. The shorthand label given this court-made authority is judicial review. So here's the Supreme Court, made up mostly of Federalists, that decides in the first full year of the Jefferson presidency, oh, by the way, we have the power to decide what you Republicans in Congress do or what the Republican president does is constitutional or not. And this quite literally, is the foundation for the runaway power exercised by the federal courts to this day. The shorthand for this, judicial review. What is far less recognized is that Marbury started out as anything but the ominous precedent it has become. You ready? Marbury was a brilliantly conceived political strategy created by John Marshall, a master politician. Marshall, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, wrote the decision not to set a revolutionary precedent, but to deny the new President Jefferson, his longtime political rival, an opportunity to rebuff a Supreme Court controlled by Jefferson's Federalist opponents. Marbury was precipitated by the election of 1800, in which Thomas Jefferson, the incumbent vice president and leader of the Republicans, ran for president against the incumbent president John Adams, leader of the Federalists. The Federalists controlled both houses of Congress, but were torn between the followers of Adams and Alexander Hamilton, who was also a Federalist. Now, Hamilton's faction withheld its support for Adams' re-election bid in 1800, and the race ended in an electoral college tie between Jefferson and his vice presidential running mate, Aaron Burr. Whole nother crazy story. Adams came in third. The election was then thrown into the House of Representatives. Realizing he would not win re-election, Adams moved to solidify his party's influence in the federal government. So he exploited the situation. The passage of the Judiciary Act of 1801, creating 16 new federal circuit judgeships, was part of Adams's strategy. Just prior to leaving office, Adams selected, and the Federalist-controlled lame duck Senate confirmed, nominees to fill these posts. Adams' term ran out, however, before John Marshall, who was then Secretary of State. He was Adams' Secretary of State. Could actually deliver the commissions of office to some of the designees. Marshall's successor, because he moved to Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in the last year of Adams' presidency, Marshall's successor as Secretary of State, James Madison, refused to deliver the commissions at President Jefferson's direction, and William Marbury, among others, filed suit in federal court seeking an order, a writ of mandamus, directing Madison to deliver his commission as Justice of the Peace. Is this clear so far, Mr. Producer? So Marshall, long a rival of Jefferson's in Virginia politics, was one of the most articulate leaders in the Federalist Party. Marshall had served in the Virginia State House, the U.S. House of Representatives, as one of John Adams's representatives to France in 1797, and then as Secretary of State. He was nominated to be Chief Justice by President Adams and assumed the post on February 4, 1801, exactly 1 month before Adams left office. With a Republican majority elected to both houses of Congress in 1800, Marshall realized that Jefferson and his Republicans could excuse me, I'm having trouble reading, could denude the Supreme Court of authority, and then he, as Chief Justice, could be impeached and removed from office. Marshall understood that, in the Marbury case, if he ordered Secretary of State Madison to deliver Marbury's commission to office, Jefferson would order Madison to ignore the Supreme Court, and the court's authority would be seriously weakened. Marshall was also concerned that he not be seen as protecting the interests of the Federalist jurists, like Marbury, who had assumed his position as a justice of the peace and had been hearing cases and issuing judgments for a year before he was confirmed. Bearing all this in mind, Marshall's decision in Marbury, while upsetting the Constitution's balance of power, and the relationship between the federal government and the states was a master political stroke. Marshall stated that Marbury, consistent with legal doctrine at the time, had something akin to a property right to the office to which he had been nominated, and confirmed. Marshall also said that the federal judiciary could be able to issue an order directing the appointment of Marbury, but because the Constitution did not enumerate such an original right for the Supreme Court, the court was powerless to do so. He says, look, probably has a property right in that judgeship, but we don't have the authority to do anything about it. But Marshall then went on. He went beyond the specific issues in the case. Now, by the way, remember, as Secretary of State, it was Marshall who signed off on this guy's courtship, Mr. Producer. He shouldn't have been hearing the case. He shouldn't have been involved in the case, since he had been a material actor in the case. So Marshall went well beyond the specific issues in the case. He said that the court had a responsibility to set aside acts of Congress that violate principles enumerated in the Constitution. So he says, look, we don't have the power in this case to give this, to maintain this guy's judgeship, to give him the judgeship. But I want to be clear, even though we're not doing it, so he rules on behalf of Madison and Jefferson. But then he says, but I just want to be clear, we have the power to make the final judgments on whether an act of Congress, the act of a president, is constitutional or not. Based on what? Based on nothing. In fact, I quote, he said, between these alternatives, there is no middle ground. The Constitution is either a superior, paramount law, unchangeable by ordinary means, it's on a level with ordinary legislative acts, like other acts, is alterable when the legislature shall please to alter it. But he says, the judicial power of the United States is extended to all cases arising under the Constitution. Could it be the intention of those who gave this power to say that in using it, the Constitution should not be looked into? That a case arising under the Constitution should be decided without examining the instrument under which it arises? This is too extravagant to be maintained. That's the most famous paragraph of all. The reason I'm having trouble reading is I don't have my glasses. So in any event, there he is. Now, he didn't punch Jefferson in the nose and Madison in the nose. He gave them this judicial vacancy back. But in doing so, he assumed enormous powers for himself, the other Federalists on the court, and the Supreme Court forever. Hey, look, if we're supposed to look at this stuff, of course we have to look at whether it's constitutional or not. Marshall's Federalist Party had lost the presidency in Congress, but Marshall was determined to fight back. And so the doctrine of judicial review was born. Yes, the Constitution is indeed the supreme law of the land. But now the court, and this court in particular, by its own fiat, would decide what is or is not constitutional. The Constitution's structure, including the balance of power between these branches, was now broken. Although Jefferson is claimed by modern Democrats as the father of their political party, he was a leading opponent of judicial activism. And after Marbury, Jefferson became an even more vocal critic of what he viewed as the overreaching of the judiciary under Marshall's leadership. To Abigail Adams, John Adams' wife, Jefferson wrote a year after Marbury the following: the Constitution meant that its coordinate branches should be checks on each other. But the opinion, that's Marbury, which gives to the judges the right to decide what laws are constitutional and what not for themselves in their own sphere of action, but for the legislature and executive also in their spheres, would make the judiciary a despotic branch. And he became even more irritated by it up to the time he died. Now, according to some people on TV, according to some people in the media, You're not to criticize what these lower court judges are doing. What do you think Jefferson and the founders would have thought of federal district judges created by Congress, ruling outside their districts, issuing national edicts across the land, probably on 24 occasions in the last 6 weeks, overruling the President of the United States without, frankly, constitutional or legal bases of any significant kind? What do you think Jefferson would say about that? And to repeat, we have separation of powers, number one. To repeat, number two, the idea of judicial review, it may be an implied power, but it was grabbed, it was seized by Marshall. So shouldn't the courts at least be a little restrained in their use of judicial review? The answer is yes, of course. Number three, Congress has no power to delegate the power of the presidency to judges that they create. Number four, no president has the power to delegate to judges that Congress creates and he signs off on and changes the balance of power for the president. In other words, no branch has the power to rewrite the Constitution, to take one power from another branch. And yet we're seeing it over and over and over again on the ministerial duties of this president. Whether it's immigration and the deportation of violent gang members, whether it's what you put on websites in the federal government, whether it's the abolition of a department or an agency within a department, whether it's human resources decision about how many bureaucrats you want and which ones you're going to release. And you'll hear people say, well, it has to comply with a federal statute. Well, if a federal statute is tying the hands of the President of the United States, who's in the Constitution, who's elected nationwide, only he and the Vice President, then there are serious questions. If they go to the heart of the ability of a president to manage his executive branch, a unitary executive branch, claiming independent agencies, claiming that they had written statutes to tie his hands, then let me suggest to you that most of that is unconstitutional. And no, I won't shut my mouth. You can tell the Hamas supporters to shut their mouths. Me, never. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Listen, folks, if you're like me, you're passionate about protecting our American values. That's why I trust the Heritage Foundation. They're dedicated to promoting policies based on free enterprise, limited government, and traditional American values. The Heritage Foundation does more than just produce policy recommendations. They're mobilizing conservatives across the country. And right now, they need you to take action by completing their national survey on President Trump's agenda. Your responses to this survey will help guide Heritage leadership as they work closely with folks in Washington to promote your values, secure America's borders, and restore our freedoms. Here's what I want you to do. Visit heritage.org/Levin, heritage.org/Levin to complete your survey. It's very, very important. My friends at Heritage need you to act now to help them maximize the impact on President Trump's first 100 days. Heritage is committed to preserving our founding fathers' principles and ensuring that America remains a beacon of freedom and opportunity. So I know you won't sit on the sidelines. You'll get involved, please, today, and make your voice heard. Visit heritage.org/Levin. That's heritage.org/Levin. Please complete your survey today. That's heritage.org/Levin, paid for by the Great Heritage Foundation. Now you know more than 99.9% of the people, the other people of the United States, and probably 90% of the attorneys who like to hear themselves talk. Marshall was extremely political. He was a political animal. He was given the Chief Justice slot on the Supreme Court 1 month before Jefferson took over and Adams was leaving. And he used that position to seize power from the elected branches. That's what he did. And today we just quaintly call it judicial review, and we're supposed to bow every time it's issued. We'll be right back. This segment of the podcast is exclusively sponsored by Pure Talk. Pure Talk offers great coverage and can save your family money on your wireless bill every single month. Go to puretalk.com to find the plan that's right for you. Thank you again for listening, and thank you so much for this sponsorship, Pure Talk.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Let me help some of the Iranian apologists out there. And for the apologists of the Iranian terror regime, a nuclear warhead on an intercontinental missile has the capacity to kill millions of Americans. Millions. To pretend otherwise is unconscionable and insane. President Trump is 100% right. Iran must never get a nuclear weapon. Ever. And to say otherwise is so contemptible, so moronic. You see, ladies and gentlemen, from George Washington on, our foreign policy is supposed to be based on what's called prudence, not ideology. If you're so ideologically gone, if you're such an ideological fanatic that you kiss the ass of Iran, you kiss the ass of Qatar, you kiss the ass of Russia, you kiss the ass of China and all the rest of it, there's something wrong with you. They're our enemies. Not because we've done something wrong, not because there's something wrong with us, not because the neocons and the warmongers control foreign policy, not because of the influence of the Jews. A nuclear warhead on an intercontinental missile will kill a lot more than Jews. It'll wipe out our cities. President Trump is 100% right. Iran must never get a nuclear weapon. I stand with him. Period. Period. Now, you folks have to make a determination. In this audience, you are smarter than the average bear, smarter than the average human being. Yes, you are. You have to decide if you want to join the ranks of this ideological cabal that claims that it supports America first when it supports our enemies first. You have to make that decision. They don't support President Trump. They don't believe in peace through strength. They make excuses for the Islamo-Nazi regime in Tehran. They make excuses for the Islamo-Nazi regime in Qatar that are poisoning our colleges and universities. We have nothing in common with Islamist Nazi terrorists. Zero. They hate the West. They hate Christians. They hate Jews. The word Muslim is different than the word Islamist. Look it up. I'm not talking about Muslims generally. I'm talking about Islamists. Islamists run Iran. Islamists run Qatar. Islamists run Hamas and Hezbollah and the Muslim Brotherhood and Al-Qaeda. Islamists run the Taliban. What you see at Columbia and Barnard and all the rest of these Ivy League schools are Islamists marching with Marxists. That's the side the apologists for Iran and Qatar are taking. Not the American side, not our side. President Trump is trying to deport people like this. We don't embrace them. We don't want more of them. This is the enemy within. So the apologists, the appeasers, some of them I'm sure have received money from these various overlords. They're undermining America. They're undermining our military. Excuse me. They're undermining our Constitution. Their mouths, their words, their faces are used by the enemy to attack us at their own homes. Now, when that regime in Iran falls, and they all do, whether it's tomorrow, whether it's 5 years or 50 years from now, then people will be free to speak. Why is it that they're not free to speak today? Why is it that they have phony elections? Why is it that they have massive torture chambers in prisons? Why is it? How anybody in this country, anybody, could defend it, let alone support it, and trash people in our country who bang the pots and pans, who ring the alarm bells, and say, no, Iran must never get a nuclear weapon. They'll have the capacity to blow New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Detroit, Philadelphia, every other major city in our country off the face of the earth. We cannot tolerate that. They're the primitives. They're the barbarians. They're the throwbacks. They believe God has told them not just to wipe out Israel, not just to wipe out the United States, but all of Western civilization. No Christian should live. No Jew should live. For that matter, no Muslim should live who dares to challenge them. Look at the hellhole these places are. The fear-mongering and the scaremongering. The lies and the propaganda. Warmonger. Warmonger? Warmonger? So I'm a warmonger because I want to protect our country from a nuclear assault by Iran? Boy, is that effed up. Boy, is that a sick mind. And when you ask these people, what do they mean? They attack us. That is the United States of America. Well, it's our fault. Well, they tried it. Obama tried to appease them. Biden tried to appease them. Biden did more than appease them. Biden funded them. And what do? They move faster to get their nukes. Why is China helping them? Why is Russia helping them? Why is North Korea helping them? Why is Iran in our hemisphere? Why is Iran in Central and South America? Because they want to be left alone to their own devices? Why is Iran in Gaza? Why is Iran in Lebanon? Why is Iran in Yemen? Why is Iran in Iraq? Why? Why are they backing the Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, and on and on and on? I dare you to read Hamas's mission statement. It's online. I dare you to read it. You know who they want to get? You. You know who they want to target? You. So why are they being funded and subsidized by Iran? Why do you think? Ladies and gentlemen, there's good and evil in this case. We're good, they're evil. And these people who use the phrase warmonger are attacking our military. They're attacking our patriots. They're attacking our president. They're attacking MAGA. Notice they say, we don't want forever wars. Okay, great. But apparently Iran does. Apparently China does. You see, ladies and gentlemen, they're so moronic. Putting aside war in the military, they don't understand what you and I understand. They don't understand what people who read the Bible understand. There's good and there's evil. And evil can't be wished away. You know what? I don't believe in never wars, so let's get out of NATO. Dumb bastard. The enemy's willing to move not because we're in NATO, because they're evil. Because they're evil. You should be furious at people who say just lie down, roll over, get in a fetal position while Iran arms itself. I don't know of a Republican president or virtually any Democrat other than Obama and Biden that would go along with that. I really don't. I really don't. The sick, perverse, unhinged, mental gyrations and gymnastics that people have to go through to explain such things is outrageous. You don't have to play along. You know right from wrong. Iran's already killed God knows how many Americans. God knows how many Americans. Iran's tried to assassinate our President of the United States when he was running for President of the United States. That's an act of war. Iran wants to assassinate other officials and former officials in our government. It must be our fault. Oh, it's our fault. These mouthpieces for the enemy, whether they're paid or not. I mean, if they're paid, I get it, right? They sold out. But if they're not paid, then they're just plain damnable and sick. I've had people in my family who have fought in wars. And I'm sure they would say, never, ever let a country like Iran get a nuclear weapon. This isn't a game. This isn't about ideology, about warmongers and peace lovers. These are people who fundamentally don't understand right from wrong and good from evil, or they're paid off. Either way, if you're president of the United States, you can't run a military in a country to adopt such a sick, perverse, unconscionable ideology as those who would tell him, don't do anything. Don't do anything. If you care about peace, if you care about your country, if you're concerned about millions of casualties, death, and horrendous casualties, if you're concerned about not one nuclear weapon, but hundreds, once they get one, it's easy to make hundreds of nuclear weapons in the hands of Islamo-Nazis in Tehran, who have said again and again and again, death to America, who've killed American Marines directly and indirectly, who've killed American combatants directly and indirectly, who want to wipe out all the Jews and Christians in the Middle East, who want to destroy the Holy Land, any semblance of the two oldest religions, who detest the West, who believe that the only way to heaven, the only way to God's arms, is to destroy the West. You need to stop listening to those people, starting right now. These are grifters. Grifters. That's what they are. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
This country was founded on freedom. Freedom from a country that forced us to buy overpriced tea, then try blockading us when we dumped their tea into the ocean. How'd that work out? Well, it's time to throw your overpriced big wireless contract overboard, too. You don't need to pay $100 a month per person just to get a free phone. Pure Talk, my cell phone company, says no to inflated prices and gimmicks. With a qualifying plan of just $45 a month, you can choose a free iPhone 14 or a free Samsung Galaxy with qualifying plans. And yes, this is for a premium service. Unlimited talk, text, 25 gigs of data, and mobile hotspot at a fraction of the price of the big three. All on America's most dependable 5G network. Get your free iPhone 14 or Samsung Galaxy with qualifying plans by visiting puretalk.com/Levin today. Switching is easy. Again, that's puretalk.com/LEVIN to claim your free iPhone or Galaxy with a qualifying purchase from Pure Talk. America's wireless company, my wireless company. I'm going to circle back. I never lose my place to these judges. There was a response and motion filed by the Trump administration against these plaintiffs who sued in front of this radical left-wing rogue judge who had ordered the return of the Venezuelan terrorists, criminals, and the like. And the Trump administration responded this way. Plaintiffs cannot use these proceedings to interfere with the president's national security and foreign affairs authority. And this court lacks jurisdiction to do so. In response to plaintiffs' filing and this court's order setting a hearing for this afternoon, the government submits the below response because it provides the necessary information to confirm the government's compliance and represents the full extent of what counsel is authorized to share with the public or plaintiffs. The court should vacate the hearing and de-escalate the grave incursions on executive branch authority that have already arisen. This is a brilliant 8-pager, by the way. Number one is the government has already explained and plaintiffs do not appear to dispute the government complied with the court's temporary restraining order issued during the morning of March 15 and did not remove any of the 5 individual plaintiffs. The government did so despite its powerful jurisdictional and other objections to the court's unprecedented assertion of judicial power to review the proclamation. Number two, much of the plaintiff's submission rests on the oral directives that the court provided during the hearing held during the evening of March 15. But as plaintiffs implicitly recognize, the court's written jurisdiction, which issued at approximately 7:25 p.m. Eastern Time, properly did not seek to interfere with the president's Article II powers to conduct military operations overseas by directing the return of aliens. Contrary to plaintiffs' assertions, an oral directive, meaning of the court, is not enforceable as an injunction. A judge who proclaims, "I enjoin you," and does not follow up with an injunction has done nothing. And if the judge does not record an injunction on declaratory judgment on a separate document, the defendant is not under judicial compulsion. Indeed, the rule provides, and they go on, the district has long followed that principle. See Landmark Legal Foundation versus the EPA, 2003. An injunction does not become an injunction until it is reduced to a writing. I argued that case when I was president of Landmark Legal Foundation in 2003 in federal district court before Judge Royce Lamberth. The issue there, similar to this one, but different in the facts, was whether or not the EPA could be held in contempt for an oral directive that had not been reduced to writing. And the judge said no, because it doesn't give enough notice, timely notice, to the party to which it's directed to. The Trump administration lawyers at the Department of Justice have wisely cited Landmark's case, my case, from 2003, Mr. Producer, 22 years ago, with Pete Hutchison, Mike O'Neill, Matt Forays, that I stood in that courtroom, actually on several occasions, and I argued this case. And the EPA was eventually held in contempt, as a matter of fact. In that event, the written order controls. The written order controls. Indeed, the narrow written order may well represent a more considered judgment by the court about the proper exercise of its powers. It goes on to cite an appellate case. In accordance with this well-established law, the written minute order governed. It enjoined the government from removing the foreign terrorists pursuant to the proclamation. The government did not violate that injunction. So now what the judge is trying to do, I guess, in a squirrely, deceitful way is to look for some way to punish the Trump administration. Now, he may wind up doing it, but it won't stand. In part because of Landmark Legal Foundation's case 22 years ago. I'll be right back. This country was founded on freedom. Freedom from a country that forced us to buy overpriced tea, then tried blockading us when we dumped their tea into the ocean. How'd that work out? Well, it's time to throw your overpriced big wireless contract overboard, too. You don't need to pay $100 a month per person just to get a free phone. Pure Talk, my cell phone company, says no to inflated prices and gimmicks. With a qualifying plan of just $45 a month, you can choose a free iPhone 14 or a free Samsung Galaxy with qualifying plans. And yes, this is for a premium service. Unlimited talk, text, 25 gigs of data, and mobile hotspot at a fraction of the price of the big three. All on America's most dependable 5G network. Get your free iPhone 14 or Samsung Galaxy with qualifying plans by visiting puretalk.com/Levin today. Switching is easy. Again, that's puretalk.com/LEVIN to claim your free iPhone or Galaxy with a qualifying purchase from Pure Talk. America's wireless company, my wireless company.
Mark Levin, the thunder on the right. Call in now, 877-381-3811.
Now, just to give you an example of how totally out of control this can become, I turn to what was once a democracy in the Middle East. Some of you might be saying, what are you talking about, Mark? I've always told you about Marxism and Islamism. I've told you about the fusion of two, Marxism and Islamism. They have a overlapping goal, which is to destroy the West. Destroy the West. In Israel, there's no fusion of Marxism and Islamism. There is Marxism. It's the minority ideology, but it exists. It was imported from Europe. The old Marxists and socialists who came to Israel from Europe, they're trying to hang on to power. They can't win elections anymore. But they control the judiciary. They control the press. Things I've been warning you about for 2 decades. And there's a piece written by Rabbi Stephen Przansky, who used to live in America. Now he lives there. He calls this a judicial dictatorship. He says on December 7, 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, destroying much of the U.S. Pacific Fleet and killing 2,403 Americans. The commanding officer was Admiral Husband Kimmel. How long did it take President Franklin Roosevelt to fire Kimmel, relieve him of his command, and demote him in rank? It took all of 10 days until Admiral Chester Nimitz was designated Kimmel's replacement. No one called on FDR to resign. Less than 4 years later, the war in the Pacific was over and the Americans were victorious. Stick with me on this. How is it that those responsible for the catastrophe of October 7, 2023 in Israel were not held accountable? How is it possible that the chief of staff, the head of the Southern Command, head of military intelligence, and the head of Shin Bet, all abject failures in their assigned tasks, continue to serve them well beyond what would be normal given their performance? How is it that the incessant reports, the female military observers, were ignored? And who ignored them? Why do we not yet know the names of their commanders who disregarded their warnings? And are they still serving in their roles? Why weren't they all dismissed within 10 days? Sure, the answers are multifaceted and laden with political implications and personal considerations. But one factor stands out above all others. We're living in a judicial tyranny, a judicial dictatorship. Sound familiar? In which unelected judges and the elite legal establishment effectively govern the country and hamstring our elected officials. Just remember, what was taking place over the last two and a half years against Donald Trump. Just remember when he was president the first time what they were doing to him. The judiciary, our judiciary's at it again. The Department of Justice, the FBI, the intelligence services, all colluded to take out Trump. Well, now in Israel, they've all colluded to take out Netanyahu, and they're still at it, even though he's prime minister. Galali Baharav Mira. Galali Baharav Mira is nominally the legal advisor to the government, so-called. Not even an attorney general, but functions as the head of the government. So it's always the lawyers. Ronan Bar, the head of Shin Bet, is to be fired this week. That's effectively the FBI. But the firing may not stick because the legal advisor, this guy I just mentioned, he disapproves. And he says he has the power to Trump, the prime minister. He even asserted weeks ago that he will not resign until he can designate a successor. That is the head of their effectively the FBI. I'm not going to resign until I can appoint my successor. And this so-called legal advisor agrees with him. Now, his adamance and the government's prior hesitation to act because it knew what would happen recalls the era of longtime FBI head J. Edgar Hoover, I would say Jim Comey, who could not be fired because he had dirt, true or not, on everyone. Is the Shin Bet, their FBI, threatening the prime minister? A former Shin Bet head did just that on TV. A former FBI director, essentially. So he can't be fired because, well, she cannot be fired, as she presumably disapproves of her firing, and the Supreme Court will back her up. This is not normal. It's not how democracies function. This is going on as I speak in the state of Israel. The irony is the legal advisor to the government does not at all advise the government on anything. She doesn't advise as much as she dictates. She often refuses to represent the ministries when she disagrees with their policies, leaving them without representation, except when she approves private representation. She must approve any government hiring and any government firing. So you see the courts and the bureaucracy have taken over Israel, and they're all hard left. That's what I said. The Marxist part. The Marxist part. She sits in judgment on any proposed legislation, killing those she disfavors before the Knesset. Ostensibly Israel's legislature can vote on them. She determines the extent of enforcement of laws that the Knesset has passed, disregarding those she frowns on and over-enforcing those she supports. It should be obvious to any impartial observer that we're no longer living in a democracy in Israel. The people's rule is illusory. The people's vote is ultimately meaningless. When a right-wing government, and they use right-wing as conservative over there, just so you know, when a conservative government is elected, the prime minister is effectively emasculated, forced to look over his shoulder at the legal advisor, barred from major decisions because of the legal charade that has been hovering over him for years, even if he wanted to act decisively. Now, he cannot. The legal advisor is buttressed by a Supreme Court that allows no limits on its own authority, no limits on its jurisdiction, almost no limits on its appointment of successor justices, no limits on its encroachment of the parliament, the Knesset's authority. Statutes mean nothing. The court and their legal advisor has the last word, and usually the first and middle words, on everything that transpires in society. Now you know why I'm so worked up about what our local district judges are doing. We're going to turn into this. In fact, we've already turned in some measure into this. The issue isn't what our federal district judges can order. The issue is what can't they order. They decide in Israel who serves in every major position in government. They dictate police and military policy. Isn't that what's happening in America, folks? They encroach on purely halakhic matters. No need to get into that. They superintend every government decision and Knesset law. They delight in providing every legal right to our enemies and withhold them from Jews. Same here, to our enemies and withhold them from American citizens. And they are unelected and unaccountable. The name of a democracy, there is no democracy. And note the deft linguistic trick pulled off by the Israeli left and the anti-Netanyahu crowd. In the name of democracy, they trample on every democratic norm. Then they accuse anyone who points this out of being a threat to democracy. George Orwell, who I've quoted to you before. George Orwell cannot have said it better. It's worth recalling that communist and socialist countries labeled themselves democratic republics or people's republics. To them, the biggest threat to democracy is the voice of the people, who cannot be trusted to elect the right people to govern them, because every time they vote in the conservatives now. It demonstrates that democracy can be destroyed while purporting to save it if the radicals have the courts and the media on their side. This is a warning, ladies and gentlemen, in our own country. Certainly, democracy means more than government by the people, and the essence of liberal democracy is majority rule over protection for minority rights. But that, too, doesn't happen here. Extracting confessions via torture is acceptable if a scapegoat is needed and fits the bill. Homes of civilians can be bugged and their private lives eavesdropped upon if the target is their usual target, Prime Minister Netanyahu, and the decades-long obsession with finding any criminality to pin him on. They would appreciate the crack of Lavrenti Beria, head of the Soviet secret police. Show me the man and I'll show you the crime. Ongoing efforts to hold these domestic spies accountable have been repeatedly thwarted by Her Majesty, the legal advisor, who found time to shield her son from credible accusations of theft on an army base. How corrupt. Who doubts that there are 2 or 3 tiers of justice, one for the elites, the others for religious Jews, so-called settlers, Ethiopian Jews, Sephardic Jews? It's why the radicals can block highways at will and take selfies with police, while Haredim, or so-called settlers or Ethiopians who protest, are beaten, shot with tear gas, and sometimes just shot. Left-wing protesters, Marxists, who oppose the government and shout democracy can riot at will, notwithstanding the commission of crimes. Conservative protesters who peacefully oppose left-wing government insanities like Oslo and so forth are jailed without trial. Perhaps the latter forgot to yell democracy loud enough. Isn't this shocking to you, Mr. Producer? He says about Israelis, we're an unruly people, difficult to govern under the best circumstances, but the alternative, a more powerful government run by the judicial dictatorship, threatens our very freedoms and renders our elections superfluous, if not pointless. Every government action requires its permission. Every appointment requires its approval. The legal advisor, so-called, her control over all legislation is without any statutory authority, but is a right given to her by the Supreme Court, which has no authority to convey such rights. That, too, is a clever trick, bypassing the legislature and the elected government. We can be sure the legal establishment role in the October 7 Hamas massacre will not be investigated, and not just the court's insistence that the IDF modify its open fire rules at the Gaza border to allow the enemy unfettered access. The loud voice calling today for the defense of democracy are those that are systematically tearing it down. It should be no surprise to anyone that the same playbook is used in the United States, where in the last decade free speech was denied dissenting voices on the grounds of protecting free speech. Election fraud was defended on the grounds that democracy was endangered, and the head of the government was investigated and prosecuted for years, meaning Donald Trump. The greatest paradox is that more Trump and Netanyahu were persecuted, the more popular each became with the electorate, who saw the rigged system and the unfairness of it all. If it's fair to ask, who exactly is running our country? Who will challenge a court system and legal establishment that is running amok, disobeys written laws, fabricates others as it suits them? It is shameful but not unexpected that any attempt to reform judicial establishment is met with threats of violence and national suicide, all, of course, to protect democracy and freedom. The people of Israel do not want a secular progressive state. They want a Jewish state rooted in Jewish values, tethered to tradition, to Jewish history, to our eternal and divine mission. That is what we vote for repeatedly, only to be thwarted by the judicial dictatorship and its minions. It's just like our judiciary's attack on Judeo-Christian values all the time. The removal of the Ten Commandments, on and on and on. A government that cannot fire unelected bureaucrats, he closes, no matter their incompetence or malfeasance, is subservient to them and has forfeited its legitimacy. Only determined government action will protect democracy and hasten the demise of the judicial dictatorship. This is why we must speak up about what's happening with our judiciary, these Clinton, Obama, Biden-appointed judges. We must not be silenced by the ruling class, in their media, in their newspapers, by the Democrats, by their academics and professors. We must speak out louder than ever, civilly and legitimately, or we too are going to lose our country. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
This country was founded on freedom. Freedom from a country that forced us to buy overpriced tea, then try blockading us when we dumped their tea into the ocean. How'd that work out? Well, it's time to throw your overpriced big wireless contract overboard, too. You don't need to pay $100 a month per person just to get a free phone. Pure Talk, my cell phone company, says no to inflated prices and gimmicks. With a qualifying plan of just $45 a month, you can choose a free iPhone 14 or a free Samsung Galaxy with qualifying plans. And yes, this is for premium service. Unlimited talk, text, 25 gigs of data, and mobile hotspot at a fraction of the price of the big three. All on America's most dependable 5G network. Get your free iPhone 14 or Samsung Galaxy with qualifying plans by visiting puretalk.com/Levin today. Switching is easy. Again, that's puretalk.com/LEVIN to claim your free iPhone or Galaxy with a qualifying purchase from Pure Talk. America's wireless company, my wireless company. Those of you who've listened to this program over the years, you can see the things that we've talked about, the books that I've written, all lead to this point. All lead to this point. You see, they talk about forever wars. Every war is not a military engagement. Sometimes it leads to a military engagement. But we have enemies within and enemies outside. And they are great enemies. I don't mean great in a good way. I mean powerful. Liberty versus tyranny. Good versus evil. Right versus wrong. This is a forever war. It's not always manifested in military action, but it's a forever war. We're facing it right now in our own country. And we have people, Republicans, some on TV and radio telling us to back off. No, we don't back off. The Power Hour is next. Don't miss it. Hour 3. I'll be right back.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, America. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811. We'll take some calls at the bottom of the hour. 877-381-3811. But here's a little trick. If you don't call early, you don't get in. It's that simple. Our phone bank's filled up immediately. This from President Donald J. Trump earlier today on True Social. Let nobody be fooled. The hundreds of attacks being made by Houthis, the sinister mobsters and thugs based in Yemen, or are hated by the Yemeni people, all emanate from or created by Iran, he puts in caps. Any further attack or retaliation by the Houthis will be met with great force, and there's no guarantee that force will stop there. Iran has played the innocent victim of rogue terrorists from which they've lost control. Excuse me. But they haven't lost control. They're dictating every move, giving them the weapons, supplying them with money and highly sophisticated military equipment, and even so-called intelligence. Every shot fired by the Houthis will be looked upon from this point forward as being a shot fired from the weapons and leadership of Iran. and Iran will be held responsible and suffer the consequences, and those consequences will be dire. As I told you, I stand with the president. We have reprobates, propagandists, grifters who do not. All you have to do is listen to them or read what they post. But he's not alone. Mike Waltz, National Security Advisor. Boy, is he good or what? Absolutely superb. On ABC this week, cut 3, Mr. Producer, go.
What the president has completely, as repeatedly said, is that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. All options are on the table to ensure it does not have one. And that's all aspects of Iran's program. That's the missiles, the weaponization, the enrichment. They can either hand it over and give it up in a way that is verifiable, or they can face a whole series of other consequences. But either way, we cannot have a world with the Ayatollahs with their finger on the nuclear button. We cannot have a situation that would result in an arms race across the Middle East in terms of nuclear proliferation. And President Trump is determined one way or another. Iran has been offered a way out of this to make sure that we don't have a world that can be threatened by a radical regime, not only our ally Israel, but the entire world that would be threatened by a radical regime that could destroy not only Israel, but its neighbors and have the capability to hit the United States. Martha, we cannot imagine a situation like that, and we're not going to have it.
So why don't these media outlets, the entrails of the corporate media, like Mediaite and their ilk, why don't they mention the voices, the faces of the individuals who claim to support the president, but don't support the president on this? You heard what the president wrote. I read it to you. You heard what Mike Waltz said on ABC this week. He's his national security advisor. Now you're going to hear from Marco Rubio on Deface the Nation yesterday. Cut 4, go.
Strike in Yemen is about their ability, the ability of the Houthis to strike global shipping and attack the U.S. Navy, and their willingness to do it. 174 times against the U.S. Navy, 145 sometimes against global shipping. That's what the strike is about. What we can't ignore, and the reason why the president mentioned Iran, is because the Iranians have supported the Houthis. They've provided them intelligence. They've provided them guidance. They've provided them weaponry. I mean, there's no way the Houthis, the Houthis would have the ability to do this kind of thing unless they had support from Iran. And so this was a message to Iran. Don't keep supporting them, because then you will also be responsible for what they are doing in attacking Navy ships, in attacking global shipping.
So I stand with the president. I stand with the national security advisor. I stand with the Secretary of State. The appeasers, the grifters, the sellouts who claim to be American firsters, who have platforms, who have voices, who are posting, they stand with the enemy. Oh, I'm not done. Pete Hegseth on Fox News yesterday, and he'll be on Life, Liberty, and Levin on this coming Sunday. Cut 5, go.
Can you tell us how it all went down on Saturday?
Well, it all went down because an era of peace through strength is back. Just like in his first term, President Trump had to deal with the weakness of President Obama and get rid of ISIS, and he did it more quickly than anybody else. We're sitting on 4 years of deferred maintenance from Joe Biden, where in particular, when you talk about the Houthis, they were allowed for over 100 times to shoot at U.S. ships, to shoot at commercial shipping. 4 months ago, when we sent a ship through, it was shot at 17 times. Ships haven't been able to go through for over a year without being shot at. Freedom of navigation is basic. It's a core national interest. And President Trump has said, we will restore that, and we will be unrelenting. I want to be very clear. This campaign is about freedom of navigation and restoring deterrence. The minute the Houthis say, we'll stop shooting at your ships, we'll stop shooting at your drones, this campaign will end. But until then, it will be unrelenting. We got the reports that the Houthi capital felt like an earthquake. Dozens and dozens of precision heavy munitions dropping precisely on the targets that we wanted to hit, sending a very clear message. And the message is clear to Iran as well. And the president said it in his truth. Your support of the Houthis needs to end immediately. We will hold you accountable as the sponsor of this proxy. And I echo his statement. We will not be nice about it. This is not the Biden administration. The message is clear. We will come after the Houthi, and the Iranians better stay out of it.
So now we have the president. We have Mike Waltz, National Security Advisor. We have Marco Rubio, Secretary of State. We have Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense. And, of course, me. I agree with these men 100%. The Houthis are an offshoot of Iran. Hamas, an offshoot of Iran. Hezbollah, an offshoot of Iran. They must not get a nuclear weapon. And that navigable area that's crucial to the United States and other countries is to remain open. Open. So I would ask you, America, are they warmongers? Are they neocons? What are they? No, it's peace through strength. Trump, Reagan, any rational president. You find most of the people who are saying, don't touch Iran. They sound like Obama. Not American firsters, not MAGA. They sound like the people who talk about the fundamental transformation of America, the people who want America's superpower status to be reduced, degraded, denuded. The Blame America First crowd has stolen the America First banner, or trying to. They're not MAGA, they're MAGettes. There's a difference. President, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, National Security Advisor. Are they warmongers and neocons? Are they controlled by the Jews? Are they controlled by Netanyahu and Israel? I ask our friend Joe Rogan, is that the case, Joe? Just curious. Help us figure this out, will you? I ask them all. Now, we patriotic Americans, we get it. We're the good guys. Iran's the bad guys. We get it. We know why they can't have a nuclear weapon. This isn't a joke. We're talking about the possibility of millions of people being murdered, killed. We don't have an Iron Dome over our country like Israel does. We don't. We don't have defensive systems. We have some that protect a few cities, but don't protect the whole country. President Trump wants to build that. We must build that. We are open, completely naked, to an intercontinental ballistic missile from any of our enemies, and they know it. But, Mark, they also know that we'll strike back. If we can. But that doesn't save the lives of millions of people who are going to be lost in our country. This isn't funny. This isn't a game. It's not a time for amateurs. It's not amateur hour. It's not a time for misfits, miscreants, malcontents who happen to have microphones or TV cameras up their nostrils. It's time for serious people who understand what we're dealing with. People who wanted to assassinate Donald Trump. And a former Secretary of State and a former National Security Advisor, and God knows how many other people. Oh, and Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz, by the way. Those people. Well, Mark, Israel has nukes. This always amazes me. And has she used any of them against any of her enemies, even though she's had reason to if she wanted to? No. Has she threatened to use them? No. Because Israel is the heart of the Holy Land, of the Jews, of the Christians. It's a completely different mindset than Islamist terrorists, isn't it? When people make that statement, isn't it sick? Isn't it bizarre? Well, we have nukes too. Does that mean Iran should be able to get nukes? We're the good guys. They're the bad guys. Remember? There are good guys and bad guys. Just because some mouthpieces, propagandists for the enemy, have connections or more. See, I can tell you flat out, I've never taken a single penny from any foreign government, including Israel. I've never taken a single penny from any ethnic or religious organization. Period. Period. Nothing. Zero. Can they say that? Can they say that? See, if I had access to Putin or the inbred that runs Qatar or one of the inbreds from Iran, I would ask a lot of very tough questions. Very, very tough questions. I mean, for that matter, if I had access to Bernie Sanders or AOC, I would ask very tough questions. For that matter, if I had access to any rhinos, I don't have access to any of them. Stephen A. Smith once said to me, nobody wants to debate you. Well, why don't they give it a try? I'm just a dumb radio host. Right, Mr. Producer? Let's give it a shot. You never know. Maybe they'll kick my ass. You just don't know. Unless you try. You want to know the truth, America? I don't blame them. I don't blame them at all. Because I would kick their ass. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
So the official position of MAGA, from the President, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, National Security Advisor, is that Iran will not get nukes. The grifters, the American lasters, the apologists for the enemy do not speak for the President, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, or the National Security Advisor. They don't speak for me, and I'm guessing they don't speak for you either. This is bigger than a one-off country versus country or country versus region. This is a dire national security issue for the United States of America. Nothing stays local anymore, especially intercontinental ballistic missiles. Funny about that name. Intercontinental means a missile that can travel from one continent to another. When you're building intercontinental missiles, you're intending to hit us. You're intending to hit Europe. You're intending to hit locations thousands, tens of thousands of miles from where you launched the missile. And if there's a nuclear warhead on it, all the devastation you have seen in the last year in North Carolina, in Georgia, in Florida, the devastation, horrendous devastation you're seeing in Mississippi, Missouri, and other states. All of that combined is a walk in the park compared to a nuclear attack. Why would we bet our entire existence, our children and grandchildren and future generations? We talk about the sovereignty of the United States. We need to secure our border. Don't we need to secure our border from intercontinental nuclear weapons by an Islamist, Nazi, unhinged, crazy-ass regime that sought to assassinate our president? How much more do we need to know? Is this the generation that's going to let down every other generation, including past generations? I can't imagine. When the President of the United States, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State, and the National Security Advisor, all of them publicly, repeatedly, voice and write that Iran must not get a nuclear weapon. Don't you think they know what they're talking about? That's the official MAGA position. They're not warmongers. They're not neocons, whatever the hell that means. They're patriots. Two of them are combat veterans, Waltz and Hegseth. Waltz, a combat veteran in Afghanistan, Hegseth in two spheres, Afghanistan and Iraq. I don't know of anybody who's in a position of serious authority who believes Iran should be free to get a nuclear weapon. I don't know of anybody. Except some of these kook retired lieutenant colonels and so forth who work at these so-called think tanks. They're actually dumb tanks. They're actually hard libertarian or Marxist think tanks, which means nothing to me. We call that fringe. Fringe. They're the fringe crowd. But reality, we have common sense. We're the American people. We're the American people. We don't want this scum to have nuclear weapons. We know what they're capable of. Look at all the people who are dying in the Middle East as a result of Iran right now. Just look at it. Look at what they're doing, one country after another. The slaughter that goes on, the torture, the rape, the massive prison systems. What is this? How much more do we need to know? And I would ask our friends, we ought to get rid of NATO. Genius. Genius, Mike, you're a genius. How would they deal with this? What's their recommendation? Just to call people warmongers and neocons? Is that going to fix it? People who do that are the propagandists for the enemy. Make no mistake about it. Be right back.
Saving America, one show at a time. The Mark Levin Show, 877-381-3811.
Hello, America. How we be? Let's go to Reg. East Hampton, New York. Reg, how are you?
I'm great, Mark. I'm a long
not
time
Reg,
admirer.
it's Reg. I'm sure it's Reg. I'm sorry, it's not spelled right. Reg.
Yeah, it's right. That's all right. I usually get rich, but I'm a long time admirer of yours. I believe I've got all your books and read most of them. But one sticks out vis-a-vis what you're talking about with these attempts to undermine the morale, the traditions of this country, and that is when you wrote the Democrat Party Hates America.
Yeah,
and there's a book out by a guy named David Green. Yeah, that was just a straight punch to the jaw. That was you catalog all these anti-American, divisive.
I'll be honest, I felt I needed to write it before the election so people would know what we're dealing with. I think it was helpful. I think it was important. And that catalog of what the Democrat Party has done to this country, well, now that it's in that book, it's easy to access. It'll be there forever. Anyway, Reg, go ahead. I'm sorry.
There's a book. Well, no, I'm sorry to interrupt. There's a book that would be the perfect corollary to your book by a guy named David Greenfield called Domestic Enemies. He traces this tradition of divisive, corrupt, power-hungry activities all the way back to the days of Aaron Burr and his attempts to overturn. He stole elections. The Van Buren government in New York in the 1840s. The Civil War riots, which they weren't meant to help African Americans, they were meant to cost Lincoln the election. This is a pattern that's gone on. Your book and that book together should be the Bible, so that the American people will become
Mine will be
aware.
the Old Testament, his will be the New. There we go. But Aaron Burr was a real bad dude. I mean, he was running on the ticket with Jefferson, and he decided he wanted to be president. He drew all these electoral college votes away from Jefferson, who would have won fairly easily. And so they're duking it out. Jefferson and he are tied for a period of time. It has to be thrown to the House of Representatives. Adams comes in third with the Electoral College, so the battle wasn't really between him and Jefferson anymore. They actually had 36 ballots, 36 votes. And Hamilton, who was a Federalist like Adams but couldn't stand Adams, he decided to throw his support to Jefferson. And that's how Jefferson became president, through the House of Representatives. All this talk about what occurred in Congress on January 6th, apart from the people on the outside, it was a cakewalk compared to what took place in 1800. In fact, they had to amend the Constitution and add the 12th Amendment. But that said, Aaron Burr tried to take out the man who was running for president, Jefferson. And later, of course, it even got worse, and he had to escape and go to Europe. But all that said, look who tried to take advantage of it, Adams. And then look at Marshall, John Marshall, who'd been a political operative his entire life in the Commonwealth of Virginia legislature, then in the House of Representatives, then as Secretary of State to Adams, and then as the Chief Justice. He's appointed 1 month before Adams leaves and Jefferson is sworn in, and he seizes power from Jefferson and the Republicans, who control both houses of Congress and the presidency. And today we just call it the mind-numbing judicial review. And we're supposed to honor it even when judges defy it and violate it. Anyway, my friend, Reg, I really appreciate your call. Thank you for the suggestion on the book, and don't be a stranger. God bless you, my friend. Let's keep going. Tony, Gastonia, North Carolina, XM satellite. Tony, go right ahead.
Sir, Mr. Levin, how are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm great. How are you, brother?
Well, I've got several questions. I don't want to take up all the listeners' time, but how do you control your blood pressure, for one?
I don't.
Well, you need to. So let's take it one day at a time, but I'll keep it nice, and I'll try to keep it clean. Can I say pissed off? Because that's pretty much what I am, but I'll say watered off. How's that sound?
That's fine.
So
you got it.
This judge that told Trump not to send those illegal Tronde gangster murderers, rapists back over, stop the plane, turn around, don't drop them off. He said, well, screw you. He took them. Now you got this lady on MSNBC or CNN crying about, oh, they're being mistreated. They don't even have a mattress to sleep on. Well, guess what there, Miss Dumb-ass Democrat? I served my country for quite a few years. I slept on concrete.
Mm-hmm.
I served my country, and they want to pamper these pieces of trash.
Careful.
I said pieces of trash.
Let me tell you something. Tony. You're 100% correct. 100% correct. They think all these third world countries treat prisoners like we do. No, they don't. And they don't belong here. And they need to be removed. I don't care what some slip-and-ball lawyer in a black robe says or not. They're way out of line. Ordering a president of the United States, the commander-in-chief, to return, to tell airplanes to return and bring these thugs back to the United States. Let me ask you something, Tony. Did any of these judges step in and say, Joe Biden, don't let these thugs into our country? What, it only goes one way? Apparently so, Tony. Anyway, brother, I really appreciate your service, and I loved your call. Call back again. God bless you. Dan, Oconto, Wisconsin. The great WTAQ. How are you, Dan?
Pretty good. Thanks for taking my call, Mark. It's a privilege to talk to you, and you're one of my great American heroes.
Oh,
but I want to focus our thoughts. Yeah, you are. I told a liberal friend of mine that, and he laughed.
Yeah, well, you know where he can stick it.
But anyway, I'm focusing
By the way,
on...
Just so you know, I'm not here for the libs. Unless they have an open mind, I'm really not. They have all the media propaganda they could possibly want. This is our national town hall meeting. They're welcome to participate. But I don't need to convince them. You know, there's some people you can convince, some you can't. If these people are still head knockers, it's just the way it is. Anyway, go right ahead.
He's a great friend, though. All right, here's I'm focusing on the president's oath, where he has sworn. He's required to take an oath to make himself accountable to God.
It's right in the Constitution.
To defend the Constitution of the United States, not the majority opinion of the Supreme Court. And in my way of thinking, his opinion on how to execute his job in light of the Constitution carries as much weight, even as the majority opinion of the Supreme Court. And the reason we don't see these things is because our politics and political thought has been so contaminated by not only this Marbury versus Madison case, but also the top three tenets of the progressive movement, namely the idea that the courts create a living constitution that changes with every decision, or we need to be governed by the science of administration. So we need this administrative state, which is unconstitutional, because nowhere in the Constitution does Congress have the right to delegate its lawmaking responsibility to an independent agency. And then the third thing is this progressive movement reduces the president to like a political weather vane. Okay, every 4 years we're going to see what the people are really thinking about, blah, 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 blah. So, but now we have a strong president. All
right, first of all, before we run out of time, and you're very good. Your position is Thomas Jefferson's position, that all three branches have the right to comment on what is and is not constitutional. And that was that was really the consensus position at the time. Marbury versus Madison really turned that upside down. Now, the opponents that you speak of, and you described very well, is the Wilson ideology. So it's really Jefferson versus Wilson, if you will, about the bureaucracy, unelected, unconstitutional, and the judges, many cases created by Congress, the unelected judges, who are to sort of counter-revolution, the American Revolution, top-down. And this is why, you're right, Donald Trump is really taking this by the horns, wrestling it to the ground with the help of Elon Musk and others. And this is why they can't stand him. And this is why they use the language, our language, to define themselves. They claim to be the small d Democrats, the small c constitutionalists, and so forth and so on, and that project onto Donald Trump their true ideology, their true belief system, which is tyrannical. So if I had a new book to give you, Dan, I would, and someday I will. I want to thank you for your call. It's absolutely outstanding. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
I have some breaking news, America. Hosted by the Office of the Minister of Defense in Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Israel Katz have instructed the IDF to act forcefully against the Hamas terrorist organization in the Gaza Strip. This was after Hamas repeatedly refused to release their hostages. And so, my interpretation of that is that the so-called ceasefire is over because they can't get their hostages out. After Hamas refused to release our hostages and rejected all the offers it received from U.S. presidential envoy Steve Witkoff and from the other mediators. So the IDF, I'm quoting, is currently attacking targets of the Hamas terrorist organization throughout the Gaza Strip with the aim of achieving the war goals as determined by the political echelon, including the release of our hostages, living and dead. From now on, Israel will act against Hamas with increased military force. The operational plan was presented last weekend by the IDF and approved by the political echelon, as they call it. I'm sure this is in coordination with the United States. Hamas was dragging things on, and the hostages can't last much longer. First, they tried to come between the United States and Israel. Sure, we'll release this one hostage and the 4 bodies, but that's it. And obviously, the United States didn't fall for that, Mr. Producer. You know, I love our president. He's unbelievable. He just is something else. He's just something else. See if we can slip a couple more calls in here. Got 1 minute. Let's go to Mark, Ridgewood, New Jersey. I have a liking for Ridgewood, New Jersey, because it's near Hohokus. When I go to Hohokus, my mother-in-law's home with the family. We always go to Ridgewood. They have a great bookstore there. Great diners. All right, Mark, quickly, go.
Yes, Mark, I remember you had said something about the forum shopping and the federal district judges chosen in a way that's similar to a lottery. Could there be a statute passed by Congress that requires it be a lottery? And that the judges, their specialties, and it would actually be a lottery.
The jurisdiction, the manner in which they're chosen, how many judges there are, whether that jurisdiction should have courts, it's all up to Congress, period. Thank you, Mark. We salute armed forces, police officers, firefighters, emergency personnel, our truckers, the men and women in Ukraine, the men and women in Israel, and you, the wonderful American people. God bless you. And I'll see you tomorrow.